Cheers, Neil.
And we're live.
Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, 23rd of March, 2022, 5 p.m. And this is the Performance Scrutiny Committee Partnerships meeting. I just need to read out the following. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and the remote meetings protocol agreed by the Council, which will operate alongside the Council standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise and to help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure that their chat function is switched on and to use the facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and to remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recorded may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Okay, so we go straight into the meeting. Any apologies?
No apologies received, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay, so right, so really the chunk of today's meeting is the Newport Barnardo's strategic partnership, and I believe we've got, is it Sally, Dan, Chris and Mark here this afternoon?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, so really sort of I don't want to sort of 2 minutes in, but I'm really passing the meeting over to yourselves, and we look forward to the presentation. So over to yourselves.
Thanks very much. We'll do a quick round of introductions then, just so everyone who's on the call is aware who we are and what we do. So my name's Dan Jones. I'm a Children's Services Service Manager for Newport City Council. And then we've got Chris Cahill.
Yeah, hi guys. So my name's Chris Cahill. I'm the Partnership Manager for Newport Family Support Service. So I oversee the partnership between Barnardo's and Newport.
And then we should have Mark Carter.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Chris. And thank you, councillors. Yeah, so I'm Mark Carter. I'm the Assistant Director for Children's Services for Barnardo's Cymru, and I oversee all of our children's services in South East Wales. And obviously, the biggest and most prestigious of those is our Barnardo's strategic partnership that we have with Newport.
Brilliant. Well, we welcome you all.
Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I think what we would like to do really is to give you a real overview of our strategic partnership, which is it's been in place now for around about 10 years. So if myself and Chris are able to sort of give a bit of a presentation now, sort of about the partnership. So this strategic partnership between Newport and Barnardo's was established in 2011, which led to the development of the Newport Family Support Service. One of the key benefits of partnerships with public, private and voluntary organisations mean that we can provide innovative solutions and improve outcomes for children and young people. Both organisations financially contribute to the delivery of support services, as well as collaboratively strive to build effective support for families. This partnership enables the benefits that both the local authority and third sector brings in terms of opportunity as well as influence. The strategic partnership has also afforded us the flexibility to work in partnership with many key stakeholders to identify and address unmet needs within the community as well as enabling us to tailor our services to effectively target Newport's identified key priorities. I think it's also worth saying as well that this strategic partnership between Newport and Barnardo's was actually the first of its kind when it was set up. The primary focus of this partnership and this service is to provide support to children who are on the edge of care and their families by offering trauma-informed and evidence-based services. This means where, without receiving specialist and intensive support, that there is a risk that the child or children could be placed into local authority care due to the identified safeguarding concerns. We work with and alongside the families and young people and the child's case holding social worker and the whole team around the family to reduce family breakdown and unnecessary admissions into the care system. This is very much a partnership, working collaboratively and dynamically with the children's allocated social workers and management.
So thanks, Mark. So over the past 12 months, despite the challenges of the coronavirus pandemic, the Newport Partnership has continued to develop and embed a number of specialisms, including the development of a number of new working models and toolkits that will be discussed later on as we go through our report. I'll just give you a quick overview of some of the things that we'll be talking about in a little bit more depth as we proceed. So some of the specialisms that we'll be looking at is the family group conferencing and our lifelong links service. We specialise in working with teenagers, including exploitation work and keep safe work. We have models developed by ourselves called the change model, which looks at addressing neglect within families. We have a specialist pre-birth service called Baby and Me. We have SGO carer training that looks at providing a training program for special guardianship order carers, which looks at stabilising placements. We offer foster placement support. During the pandemic, we developed a rapid response team that works in partnership with the Safeguarding Hub and aims to prevent the breakdown and support children to remain at home safely as possible. We're also really proud of the research that we conduct within the partnership, working closely with children's services. And we've also recently looked at improved consultation and participation with young people and families with the introduction of our youth forum and parenting forum. So those are some of the things that we'll be touching on in a bit more detail as we proceed through the talk now. Mark.
Thank you, Chris. So we'd now like to start to give you an overview of the specialist projects and interventions sort of in a little bit more detail, and we'll cover sort of what each arm of the Newport Strategic Partnership covers, but also what we'll look to do is to start to explore some of the outcomes that we started to see and to look at the performance. So if we start off with the family support service. So this element of the service delivers focused interventions with children and families, with plans and goals developed in collaboration with the children and families and the relevant agencies where children are deemed and assessed by social workers to be on the edge of care, and where they have specific needs that are assessed by a case holding social worker. The Family Support Service management team undertake consultations with the case holding social worker on receipt of that referral, with then a target case allocation of the same day for urgent cases and up to 5 working days for what are deemed to be non-urgent cases. What we do find within our Newport Strategic Partnership with children on the edge of care is that what we don't want is for families to be waiting too long for that intervention. But certainly we recognise that these families often need that support near enough immediately. So our aim is to get out and start that support as soon as we can. The aim of the service is to deliver interventions of 12 weeks, to then review the involvement with all agencies at this point, with the potential to extend involvement for up to a further 12 weeks, if appropriate and agreed by the social worker, family and management. Now, the reason why 12 weeks is because what we don't want to do is to foster dependence, but also what we need to do is to really encourage families to demonstrate that they can make changes and to allow social workers the time to assess the changes being made within families. There is then a support pathway developed for the family to promote their engagement with the community and family support, empowering them to identify and safely meet their own needs in the future.
So if we look at our performance over the last 12 months, the Family Support Service supported 658 children over the past 12 months. And this was an increase of 100 children compared to the previous year. The thoughts being obviously the reduced amount of social work visiting during the coronavirus pandemic. One of the main ways that we measure performance is by looking at changes in a young person's legal status during our involvement. With a family, when a family is open to children's services, they can be on several categories, from care and support, with child protection plans, and then when concerns continue to increase, a thing called a public law outline can be initiated, in court proceedings with the final most serious concerns where the child is removed from the care of their parents. So as such, a young person's legal status was seen to stay the same and not escalate, or there was a de-escalation in concerns, this would be viewed as a positive outcome from our intervention. So over the past 12 months, just families close to our family support service, 94% of those closed cases, concerns didn't increase, and in fact de-escalated. 12% of 41 cases were closed to children's services at the end of the involvement from ourselves, and their concerns only increased in 18 cases. So we're really pleased with those outcomes, and 100% of families would recommend our service to families experiencing similar difficulties. If we're looking at age of referral, predominantly about just under 45% of our cases involve young people between the ages of 4 and 10. The lowest percentage, just under 10%, is that more around the adolescents, which is 15 to 18 years. And then the second highest, just over 25%, is from birth to 3 years. We also looked at the primary reason for referral into our service, and there's a wide variety, including domestic abuse, placement breakdown, substance misuse, relationship issues, behavioural management concerns, parental mental health, and keep safe work. But the standout primary reason for referral was parenting support. Around a third of secondary referrals focused on parental mental health being a significant issue, and 11% of referrals identified relationship work between parents as being something of concern within the family.
Thanks, Chris. So that's the family support service arm, which is a sort of a more universal family support provision for those families that are identified by social workers as requiring a specific type of intervention. Now, if we look at the more specialist programs now, and we'll start off with family group conferences. Now, family group conferences are a voluntary decision-making meeting to help families find their own solutions to problems. Now, Newport City Council and the partnership has adopted the family group conference process as a vehicle for empowering families to bring about positive changes to safeguard their children. The family group conference process then empowers the family and their network to draw on their strengths and resources to make a safe plan for their children to overcome any identified difficulties that the social worker might identify, but also the family that they might identify themselves. These difficulties can include divorce or separation, mental illness, substance misuse, parenting, conflict within the family, domestic abuse, education, poverty, physical illness or homelessness, just to name a few. Family group conferences ensure the family network have a chance to hear and discuss the concerns. They also give an opportunity for everyone to be listened to, including the child and young person. Now, the real benefit of having a family group conference set within the Newport Partnership is the element of almost semi-independence from the local authority as well. So I think sitting in sort of slightly separately, although still very much apart, it enables us to work with the families and to sort of, aside from the social worker, allow the families that sort of more neutral ground in order to hold the family group conference and to identify those concerns and identify the solutions. Now, another further exciting development in our family group conference service is that we've been successful last year in obtaining a Welsh Government grant to develop a lifelong links offer to young people who have care experience. Now, Lifelong Links is a project developed by the Family Rights Group to ensure a child has a positive support network around them to help during their time in care and into adulthood. Now, the care inquiry conducted in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales in 2013 and concluded that the greatest failing of the care system and associated child welfare procedures is that they too often break, rather than build relationships for children in or on the edge of care. Children aged 10 to 17 years are the single biggest age group of looked after children. They're also the age group most likely to be subject to frequent placement moves. This instability has lifelong multiple impacts on young people. Now, we're seeing a lot of interest in this work that's being undertaken in Newport, actually, and the Welsh Government are particularly interested in some of the successes that we're seeing in this, which Chris will talk about in a minute, in terms of the, sort of some of the outcomes. But this work really is dedicated to providing children and young people with the network to sustain them through childhood and into adulthood. Doing so then prevents those placement breakdowns. It enhances the quality of children's time in care, and it builds positive outcomes for the future for once they leave care and they're in that transition period from sort of being in care to then being semi-independent and independent in the community.
Yes, thanks, Mark. So I'll talk about the outcomes that we've had from our sort of Lifelong Links project shortly, but it's something that we're really proud of, as is our family group conferencing service, really. So that's been sort of ongoing now for the last just over 2 years, probably 2.5 years. And I'll start with some feedback that we received from a parent who had experience of an FGC. So when I first heard about an FGC, I thought it was just going to be another meeting with social workers where I'd feel left out. However, it's nothing like that. It was very relaxed, even though everyone was nervous. We were able to speak and explain how things have been for us and then make a plan that we can work with. All social work meetings with families should be set up this way. So that really sort of embodies what we're trying to get from a family group conference, whereby, you know, we empower families to take ownership of some of their difficulties and make plans then as a family to try and address them. So over the past 12 months, we had 109 FGC referrals from children's social workers, which was an increase on 51% of the previous year. Now you'll see in a lot of the outcomes that we've had, there's been quite significant increases this year, again, due to the amount of reduced social work visits in the previous year. When the outcome of cases were known, so 100% in this case of the legal status were made the same or improved. And in 56% of these cases, a young person was diverted from being looked after following the completion of an FGC, which is quite remarkable, really. In terms of our Lifelong Links outcomes, so this was a pilot that we've done over the past 12 months. And again, I'll start with some feedback that we received from a professional that was party to some of our initial Lifelong Links meetings. So this person states that a real transformation with the young person, having no idea who his family really were and having limited contact with them for many years, to establish a real connection and identity with them and himself. There's been a real positive turnaround in all aspects of his life since establishing contact with his family. So that just sort of highlights the importance of these young people having family members that they can refer to and have contact with. So we've received 14 referrals, which is considerably less than our FGC service. But we were targeted 10 by family rights groups, so that's something that we've exceeded, again, that we're really pleased with. All these young people that undertook the FGC saw increasing connections, and family relationships were rebuilt. In 5 of the cases, in contact increased significantly with extended family members and also with professionals as well. And that's an important part of the Lifelong Links project. It's not just establishing connections with extended family or immediate family, but it's also about bringing those important professionals, giving them a plan to remain in those young people's lives following their time in care. And importantly, all these young people reported have an increased sense of identity, belonging, and reduced sense of isolation and loneliness. Which is that qualitative feedback that has really made us proud of doing this project really over the last sort of 12 months.
Thanks very much, Chris. We'll allude more to the Family Group Conference and Lifelong Links sort of projects as we go on in this presentation, including in this next section, which is about the Baby and Me service. Now, the Baby and Me service, once again, sits within the Newport Strategic Partnership and provides a package of support, which includes bespoke one-to-one support, a 6-week group antenatal parenting programme called Baby Steps, and a family group conference where it's deemed appropriate and where we're able to draw together a support network of family and community stakeholders who can sort of form that team around this family once again. Baby and Me work with parents to create a safe space for families to explore their identified issues and use a range of strategies and therapeutic approaches to work empathically with parents and empower them to reach their goals of keeping their family together. Now, we use a relationship-based approach to work with families in a flexible and a trauma-informed way, recognizing that many of these parents that we work with have experienced a huge amount of trauma and adversity throughout their lives. So actually what we are trying to do is to work with them in recognition of that and to hopefully help them to move beyond some of these traumatic experiences and help them to learn ways of making positive changes throughout their lives and into parenthood. Baby and Me is a collaboration between health, and that's midwifery, mental health services and health visiting teams, and of course social care. This promotes health messages with the purpose of improving health outcomes for both the parents and the babies. We recognise the pressures of parenting alongside the child protection processes and facilitate engagement with wider services such as substance misuse, housing and mental health. To support parents to then overcome barriers to successful parenting. We also provide practical support such as budgeting or independent living skills, or supporting them into other specialist agencies who may be able to provide that specialist support as well. We recognise the importance of building these skills as early as possible in the transition to parenthood. The main criteria for this support is also around edge of care, where there is a significant likelihood that the baby would be removed from the family's care when born. So clearly a primary objective is to keep families together, but doing so safely. And we have a number of other intended outcomes, including to develop positive and healthy attachments between parents and their babies, to develop parents' understanding of risk and ability to provide safety to their babies, to decrease parental anxiety, improve mood and increase self-esteem, and to keep families together and reduce the number of babies who are becoming looked after by the local authority.
And I think, Mark, sorry, just to come in, I think what's important for councillors to be aware of is that Newport, at the time when we considered creating the Baby and Me service, had certainly needed to take a number of children into care where whereby if we'd have had this intervention at that time, we certainly believe there'd have been a stronger chance for those families to have remained together. So certainly through the inception of this service, as Mark will go on to say, we've seen a significant increase in the number of children that have been able to stay with their families, which has been a massive collaborative approach by the council and the Barnardo's partnership.
Absolutely, thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I think the fact that we've had this partnership to be able to build this project in this way, I think it's been a fantastic vehicle to allow us to innovate this project. And once again, this project is garnering a huge amount of interest in Wales, but also wider across the UK. And the Welsh Government are particularly interested, but also this service has been cited in research through the Born into Care research, which has been taking place. So it's and we're currently being evaluated actually by Research and Practice as well. So just quickly then, before we go on to looking at some of the outcomes, like Dan has suggested. So so over the past 12 months, it's been even more apparent that working in partnership with multiple agencies involved in pre and postnatal is integral to safer outcomes for babies and their mothers. The team have continued to forge positive relationships with health and mental health services so that families open to Baby and Me are better able to access the appropriate services. An example of this is that in Baby and Me, we have a midwife, and during the height of sort of the first lockdowns that we had during COVID, when it was very difficult for some professionals to see some of these parents, actually our midwife was able to see these parents sort of in the hospital and to provide that support. So I think having those links with health particularly have been absolutely instrumental really into sort of some of the success, as well as having the ability to to access health, because naturally most of the referrals through to social services, in order for us to be able to effectively work with families where there are these identified concerns early on, because you need that time to be able to work with the families, to engage them, build the relationship, but also to make those changes and to help them to make those changes. So we've been able to work with the midwives and the radiographers in the Royal Gwent Hospital, and we're sort of developing those links in the Grange to be able to really help to identify those families. And so from 12 weeks during pregnancy, we're able to take those referrals. So let's get promoting positive social networks is essential. So the use of family group conferences, and also by developing positive relationships with external agencies, with whom we've been piloting all sorts of things, such as with Happy Hands. We've been piloting pre-birth and postnatal support for when the baby's born. But these community services are integral to giving opportunities for the families to develop positive support networks of their own and to not rely on statutory services. It's probably worth noting, and we may end up coming onto this, but there's quite a number of these referrals have been through care experienced young people. So once again, having those family group conferences has been integral to the success of the service, but also for the success of the families, really. And actually, in order to build those support networks, because often care experienced young people, as we've alluded to in the lifelong links section of the presentation, can often be quite isolated, and which obviously leads to a number of vulnerabilities. So there's been a huge amount of success through the family group conferences. So I'll hand over to Chris now, who's going to talk about some of the outcomes for Baby and Me.
Yeah, so similar to the other services, I think it's right to start with some feedback that we received from a parent in regards to our Baby and Me service. I actually feel like I've been seen for me as a person and the person I am now, not everything that happened in the past. I don't feel like I've been judged by what's happened in the past. And I think that's something that's really testament to the service that the guys within our Baby and Me service do. Work with with families that have experienced complex trauma and difficulties with services previously, but working in that trauma-informed, non-judgmental way with families has really been shown to have some quite remarkable successes, really, which I'll sort of look at now over the last sort of 12 months. So we tend to work between 30 and 40 families a year. This year we had 34 referrals. The Baby and Me team were visiting families throughout the pandemic, just because of you can't not visit these families due to the concerns. Of the babies born since the team began, 61% of Baby and Me families have taken their babies home, which is a very significant number considering, like Mark's was alluding to, 53% of these parents have had their children removed previously, and 34% of families are care experienced parents. Importantly, like Mark was alluding to about the FGC, so 16 of the families have had FGC meetings, and 14 of those families took their child home at birth, so that's around 88%. Baby and Me families spend less time on the child protection register in the first year of life than comparative babies, and that's some of the research that's come out of our interim report from Research in Practice. And really the standout sort of information that we've got is since the start of the project, there's been a 48% reduction in care proceedings issued at birth since Baby and Me started, which basically equates to around 20 less babies coming into care in Newport compared to the 2 years prior to the service inception. So again, that's something that we're super proud of, really, in the team. In terms of just giving a bit of a demographic in terms of the families and the complex and multiple issues that these families have. 66% of our recurrent care parents take their baby home at birth. 56% have childhood trauma. 35% have substance misuse issues, 50% have diagnosed mental health issues, and around 50% again there's domestic abuse as a feature. So we're working with the most sort of complex and challenging families there within Newport, really. Mark.
Thanks, Chris. And in terms of Baby and Me, I think it's something. Certainly, I mean, we're very proud of the Newport partnership anyway, and I think the Baby and Me service, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about the Baby and Me service. I think there's going to be a lot happening this year with the evaluation coming out and with the increased interest through Welsh Government, and so so I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that particular part of the Newport partnership. So if we can move on now to the rapid response arm of our service. So the rapid response offers families at the risk of breakdown a trauma-informed 6-week intervention with the aim of preventing unnecessary admissions into the care system. So the team currently consists of 3 intervention workers who work in close partnership with the child protection social workers. In addition to this service, the rapid response team can also deliver specific mediation support when needed, as all staff are trained in a mediation approach. Now, the rapid response team, just to give an idea about sort of where this team sit. So within social services, there's sort of the intake element of social services called the Safeguarding Hub. Now, our rapid response team sit directly within that Safeguarding Hub, because really this is about that intervening as quickly as possible, really. So as soon as that referral comes into the Safeguarding Hub, so we can have those immediate conversations, and it's really about responding straight away. And most of our referrals that we respond to are where families are breaking down, and normally where there's adolescents involved, and where perhaps because of relationship breakdowns, there's a real risk of the family breaking down. Now, what we try and do, we go in and we sort of provide that mediation support, but also we look at that safety planning. We work with the family and with the social worker and identify a safe solution in the interim, and it then gives us then sort of a 6-week time frame to be able to really work with that family to help them through the crisis, to learn from that crisis, to hopefully avert any future crises, and then we can then develop once again another support pathway for the family. So hopefully they can, hopefully the family can remain together safely in the future.
And Mark, again, I think that the importance of the rapid response service is that it's been created at a time when obviously the pandemic has had significant impact for those families. And actually what we've seen is that those families who may have had that community-based support and intervention that weren't able to receive those services that then came through the door of children's services were then able to have that timely and intense response to prevent, again, the numbers that Mark and Chris will go on to, actually those children coming in to care. So it's a definite effective resource to respond to some of the challenges that we certainly were seeing in those early days of the pandemic, when lots of those families weren't having those interventions, and that hidden harm then started to come through the front doors to children's services.
Thanks very much, Dan. Absolutely agree. Now, in terms of looking at the outcomes, like Dan is sort of saying, I think we'll start once again. We've got a quote from a young person here who has sort of benefited from an intervention from the rapid response team. And they said, "I appreciate everything you have done for us. My home feels like a home again, and that is all thanks to you. Honestly, thank you so much." So the Rapid Response Service has worked with 71 young people during the past 12 months, where the Safeguarding Hub has assessed there being an increased risk of family breakdown and that young person coming into local authority care. Now, of these 71 young people, 91% of these children remained at home or were returned home soon afterwards, as a result of, or partly as a result of, our interventions through the rapid response team.
I did the first unmute there. So another strand of the partnership, as you can see, it's quite a beast of a project that we're running here within Newport, is our exploitation team. So working in line with Newport's child exploitation strategy, and in conjunction with partners in policing, education, youth justice, Welsh Government and community-based organisations, the Newport Partnership has developed a robust whole family approach to tackling the exploitation of children across Newport. The exploitation team is something that we're developing and expanding within the partnership, working closely with the child exploitation social worker based within children's services within Newport. So this is a really good example of that partnership working that we have with children's services. Consists of a specialist exploitation worker that works primarily with the young people that are being exploited, and a parenting worker. The parenting worker is a relatively new addition to the team, with the view that we can then start to offer a whole family approach to tackling this issue. The ethos of this team is to adopt a trauma-informed, strength-based approach to engaging young people and their families, while recognising that different relationships that young people form in their neighbourhood, schools and online can feature violence and abuse. And we need to get these to these places in order to disrupt and prevent this abuse. And this is really the notion of contextual safeguarding, and it's something that runs and is a theme throughout the support that we offer in our exploitation team. So some of the outcomes that we've had, again, I'll start with a quote that we've received from a young person who's been working with Kate, who's our exploitation worker. And this young person says, "I was putting myself at risk and I was making stupid decisions and doing stupid things. My workers helped me sort my head out. They worked with my mum and our relationship has got so much better. I don't think I'm the person I was before, and it's thanks to them. I feel safe and I feel happy." we've seen a number of reductions in the risk factors associated with exploitation. It's probably worth noting that the exploitation team works with only the most high risk young people and those that are open to operation courts. Within the family support service, we work with lower level concerns around keep safe in relationships as well, but the exploitation teams focus on the most concerning behaviours that these young people are displaying. And then, as well as there being a reduction in the number of risk factors associated with exploitation, we've also been recalled in wellbeing scores for parents and young people. And basically, since their involvement with our service, we've seen improvements in all elements of wellbeing scores for both parents and young people, which is really good. So that's our exploitation service. And I'll just finish off by talking a bit about our play therapy and child parenting relationship therapy, CPRT. We're very fortunate within the Newport Partnership to have a staff group that have multiple skill sets. We have teachers, counsellors, psychotherapists, family support workers, and something that we try to do, and it is very important to us, is trying to harness some of those skill sets within the team. As I just said, we have a number of counsellors and we have some play therapists, and what we offer to families across Newport is that ability to engage in play therapy if that's felt appropriate. Child parent relationship therapy is sort of like an offshoot of play therapy, and it works with the carers and the carers basically to upskill them to provide better support for the young people in their care. We've only got the one play therapist who's delivering this at the moment, and she's been managed to work for 8 young people. The reduced number is because of the length of time these young people are open to play therapy. But all carers for those young people that have completed the course have reported significant reductions in anxiety. There's been less aggression, improved emotional dysregulation, and a more positive family relationship. So yeah, it's something that we're hoping to expand within the service. But again, another element or another arm of the service that's been shown to have some really positive outcomes, which is fab.
Thank you, Chris. I do have another section to go on to now in terms of our prevention services. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm not sure if we want for me to continue with this presentation now, or whether we want to sort of take a pause. I'm honestly happy either way.
I think probably if you want to continue, because I know sort of if you want to continue, and then we'll sort of ask questions about all of it at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. Yeah, I was just mindful of the time, but yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So if I quickly sort of give an overview of our what we call our Newport Partnership Prevention Services. And I think we've been able to really benefit over the past few years with a really strong relationship between Newport City Council Children and Family Services and Bernardes Cymru. And accordingly, our strategic partnership has recently grown to include a range of different projects and preventative services for children, young people and families. Now, these sort of more preventative services are voluntary for children, young people and their families who would benefit from early intervention or support where they don't meet the criteria for receiving statutory social services support. So these particular prevention services include the Newport Young Carer Service, the Confident and Nurturing Family Service, and the Children with Additional Needs Service. Now, these services are primarily Families First funded, with some additional funding streams to complement the Newport Young Carers team. I think that is partly where the Newport Partnership sort of has huge advantages, often because we're able to explore sort of some wider opportunities, either through Bernardes or through the local authority, to access sort of wider funding streams. Referrals for support for all of our Newport Partnership Prevention Services can be made via the single point of access for children's emotional wellbeing and mental health. So this is called the Space Wellbeing Panel. So I'm not sure how much you do or don't know about the Space Wellbeing Panel, but it's extremely well regarded across Wales as a part of the Nest NIF model that has been rolled out and heavily championed by the Children's Commissioner. And the Children's Commissioner has used the Gwent Space Wellbeing Panel as a great example of how the no wrong door approach to support for children and families can be implemented. So attendees on this panel who would consider cases and discuss cases and identify the most appropriate support include health, social services, education, and Gwent community psychology, and obviously Bernardo's sit on there as well. So I'll quickly give just a brief overview. So the Children with Additional Needs Service, so this is a family support service primarily for families where a child has a disability. So children with additional needs can often face exclusion and discrimination from in society. Families of children with additional needs are more likely to experience poverty than their non-disabled peers, and 3 to 4 times more likely to experience abuse. So our CANS team, as we call them, provide support for families whose child or children are aged 0 to 17 years and present with these additional needs, which may be associated with physical or cognitive impairment. The eligibility criteria can extend to physical, learning difficulties, sensory impairment, and complex health needs. So just to quickly give some feedback from a mother who was supported through our CANS service. I wish we had come to you sooner, to be honest. It has been good to see what's going on and have some solution of how to come about it. A gentle approach has been good for me to give me subtle things to try. It has definitely supported me to meet my child's needs. It's calmed me down and calmed her down. The whole family now feels calmer. So really, a key focus is obviously to help families to feel safer and stronger, but also to help reduce what can be often be an enormous burden on local authority to provide statutory support. So the more preventative support that we can provide can hopefully help to reduce the number of families who need that statutory level of support. Our Confident and Nurturing Families, our CNF service, then is a more universal parenting service, and its targeted support is aimed at meeting the needs of families so they can recognise and build upon their strengths, to then be autonomous and once again to be service free. So the idea is to hopefully reduce the need for statutory support. We use a range of different tools and approaches to help families to then achieve their goals. So once again, some recent family feedback, the support has been life-changing for me and my family. I've always had support services, and for the first time I feel confident to make decisions and also give my children a choice in decisions made about them. My child is doing so much better at school, and there are no further aggressive outbursts at home since we started to use circle of security strategies. I feel like I can take charge whilst filling my emotional cup, which allows my child to be a child and for me to be the mum. So then, and lastly, our Newport Young Carers service. So Newport Young Carers supports children and young people who have a caring role at home, whether for a sibling or a parent or another family member. We are proud and privileged, honestly, to provide regular one-to-one and group sessions, but also trips and activities as well as workshops. The aim is to decrease the impact of caring on their lives, to improve confidence and self-esteem, and to give new experiences and opportunities. We offer respite, time away from their caring role, and reduce isolation. Newport Young Carers support young people who help look after a member of the family who's often sick, disabled, might have mental health problems, or is affected by substance misuse. Having got to know some of the Newport Young Carers throughout the past couple of years, it's extraordinary that there are so many of these young people that we don't know about in our society, honestly, and I think they often slip through the gaps and aren't necessarily known about, even perhaps sometimes in school. So something that we have been able to do in Newport, we were one of the first local authorities to roll out the young care ID card, so they can use this in education and in pharmacies, GPs. And we've been able to also do a number of other things, like we developed a really good partnership with Newport County FC, and we've got 40 young carers going there to a match in a couple of weeks, and it's really about providing them with opportunities, honestly, that they ordinarily don't have. And I think, just to give an example, one of the young carers who we spoke to sort of during the first lockdown about sort of the impact of COVID on them, was actually, for them, their life was like being in lockdown anyway, and there really wasn't much difference. And in fact, what it did do was perhaps it put less pressure on them, because they didn't have to go as many places like school all the time, and so they could do education at home and they could fulfill their caring role, which I think is a staggering sort of indictment, really, of sort of the experience of some of these young carers that we have sort of in Newport, but across across Wales and the UK. So there's lots more that we could say about our prevention services, but also our edge of care support. I think in the submitted report, there's a number of case studies and some further feedback. I'm happy to sort of draw a line under our presentation there, but we're also happy to continue further. So.
And fantastic, and thank all three of you for a real thorough presentation. It really was, and just by listening for myself, I've learned a lot from that. So I thank you that. Right, so I'm going to open it up to the floor. Let's have a look. Any hands up at the moment? Let's have okay, we're going to go Councillor Suller, then Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Well, Don answered my question actually about the pandemic, about what troubles you had, and which is very good. And what do you see in the future? Do you intend to get a bigger team? Because there are a lot of children out here and parents and fathers. They need our help, don't they? Thank you, Chair. Anyone?
Shall I answer? I'll answer that then. Thanks, Councillor. So, so we've got the service is ever expanding, really. I think when Mark and I came into post in around 2018, predominantly it was just family support service. So the core element of the team that worked with families referred into children's services, and the side shoots really of the family support service in terms of the rapid response team, the exploitation team, the FGC service have all subsequently sort of been added on to the wider partnership. And you're right, we are identifying increased need on our services. We're looking to develop and increase capacity within our rapid response team. We previously had 2 members of staff there. We've now recently recruited a 3rd, and we're looking to recruit a 4th in the summer, and that's through some money that Newport are providing to us. We've currently got adverts out for our FGC service, because like you've seen, it's such an integral part of what Newport is, the offer to families within Newport and our other elements of that team. They're at capacity, so we're looking at increasing capacity within our FGC service, and just within general family support. We've got adverts out currently to look at recruiting intervention workers and family support workers. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. There is the need to do that, and it's something that we've identified and are trying to sort of address, really.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm sorry I put my name down twice, Chair. I do apologise. I tried to get it off when Dan answered that question about the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suff. Councillor, I see Sally Ann. Hi, Sally. Hi, glad you could join us. Councillor Spencer. Mark, I think you're on mute.
I am, yeah. Right, I'm just going back to the pages now, sorry. Right, on page 7, I think it is, and it says, we have received 14 referrals over the past 12 months, exceeding our target of 10. How do you make a target of 10? Why not 20?
So that's for our Lifelong Links project. So the Lifelong Links project is something that we've inherited from the Family Rights Group, and that number was primarily dictated to us by them in terms of trying to embed this new approach within the service. And there's with the Lifelong Links project, because it's very much child-led, it can be the intervention can be really extended. When you tend to look at an FGC, a family group conference, they tend to be over sort of a 6-week period, but because the relationship building element of Lifelong Links, developing that relationship with that young person, if that young person wants to pause at any point, and that reduced number of 10 was to take all of that into account, really. The fact that young people can change their mind at any point, and it was something that was sort of felt appropriate by Family Rights Group, the ones that sort of piloted the original Lifelong Links project, really.
I just come in because I suppose the addition to that would just be about resource, is that this year has been the sort of trial for us for Lifelong Links, but if we were able to put more resource into the partnership, I think the demand for Lifelong Links, particularly now that Chris and his team have kind of mastered it, if you like, and done the training and got the skills, the demand would undoubtedly be greater. So some of it is just about resource and capacity. There is a limit to what the team can offer. And as Chris said, particularly with an intervention with this kind of protracted nature, to make it work.
Yeah, with Lifelong, just one further point, with Lifelong Links as well, what we're hoping to do now over the next sort of 12 months moving forward is really get it embedded into looked after reviews. So it's an active offer to all young people in care, which is something it isn't at the moment. And like Sally alludes to, that would then massively increase the demand for that project, really.
Can I just come in there quickly as well and just say that I think one of the benefits of the Newport partnership is the open relationships that we have, and there's a huge amount of transparency that exists. And I think what we're always looking to do is to make sure that we're maximising the resource that we have, which Sally says, particularly for Lifelong Links, is particularly small. But this was a pilot for Lifelong Links. But I think what we do, well, very much do, is we closely monitor sort of the performance of each arm of the Newport partnership. It's not always easy or possible perhaps to put certain targets on, but we monitor performance and we make sure that we're maximizing the resource. Sort of, we're monitoring it on a weekly or fortnightly basis.
Okay, thank you. Next page now is sorry, Chair, can I carry on?
Of course you can, Councillor Spencer.
Sorry. The baby and me outcomes says over the past 12 months, Baby and Me have received 34 referrals. Out of the 34 referrals, only one family did not engage. Do you chase that up to see why they haven't engaged, or do you just let them slip the loop as such?
I think that's a really good question. Honestly, I think engagement and family engagement is crucial, particularly in Baby and Me, with the level of intensity that we're able to offer in Baby and Me. We make a huge amount of effort to try and engage families. In terms of chasing up and sort of trying to understand more why families might not engage, that's something we absolutely try to ascertain. We've been fortunate within our Baby and Me arm of the Newport partnership to have this research and practice evaluation ongoing as well, which is really about us learning and making sure that, you know, we're doing everything we possibly can to engage and successfully work with these families and to help the local authority to make the right decisions and evidence any positive change if we're able to support these families to make positive changes. But yeah, I think effective family engagement is crucial, and I think you've picked up on a really important point there, that it's, you know, I think it was alluded to in the presentation about that relationship-based approach that's taken, and that's really a key focus of what we try and do within the Newport Partnership.
And I think, Mark, that's what I was just going to say, Councillor, that the if you think of a lot of the families that have come through that project, or as Mark and Chris said, have perhaps had negative experiences with social workers before. They've sometimes had children removed, or they've grown up with social workers, or some people they know within their family have had social work involvement. So having a worker persistently knocking doors, persistently trying to get through to them, to have conversations, to really don't give up on those people, because we know that there is capacity to change, but you really have to try really hard to not give up. It is the ethos of the Baby and Me service. It's what they're really skilled at doing, and that really is where we've seen the shift change. And actually what's happened through the course of that is actually that social workers' practice has changed as well. So we've seen the way that they've been able to engage those families who we traditionally think about not engaging. Actually, we need to be better at engaging people rather than saying people aren't engaging with us. So there's been a real shift in that. So to have one person, I know from experience that actually that would have been someone we would have tried to engage and try to work with, consistently for weeks, days and weeks, actually to make that work. So yeah, they have a tremendous evidential kind of impact there at engaging people really effectively.
Okay, thank you. One more, Chair, and I'll let somebody else come in.
That's fine, Councillor Spencer.
I've been reading through the case studies on page 17, and the one about Abby and their family, and all case studies, they're all good reading, so well done. I just wondered, is like Abby and her partner now seem to be in a good position and want to look after their baby and whatever. How long will you be supporting them? And does it ever cease, or are you always there?
So in terms of our Baby and Me support, what we tend, well, have I frozen there? What we tend to do is work with families to 6 months post-birth, but that's flexible, and we're still involved with some families 12 months post-birth, really, until the needs are met. To be honest with you, Councillor, where again, it highlights a need around capacity in terms of how long we can stay in touch with these families for. It's not something that we can do forever, but I think some of the real strengths of the Baby and Me team is that post-birth we don't just disappear, and that even if we're just at the end of the phone, sometimes that's good enough for families in terms of knowing that support's there for them. But generally it's around 6 months, but we have been involved with some families up to 12 months post-birth, really.
And what would tend to happen then, just to add in there, Councillor, what would also happen then is that those families would be stepped down or connected up with universal services, so obviously the health visitors, nurseries, if they were, play groups, etc. So that there would be a smooth transition there, that those families can then ensure there's continued support and help. But really interestingly, often they will contact the workers a year down the line and say, I'm pregnant again, you know, I'd really like to sort of tell you, you know, it's baby's first birthday. So that connection is maintained actually, you know, for future life of that child, because again, it's about those relationships that have been built that are so positive that they feel open and really wanting to sort of continue that, which is great and often very different to what their historic experiences of engaging with social workers has been like, where they're very keen not to work with social workers after the interventions. You know, actually they're very keen to continue that. So it really says a lot about the relationships that they build there in that service.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I do have some more, but I'll let some other members ask some questions. If they're not asked, then I come back.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. It's really nice to hear all the positive feedback of the partnership, and I just hope that it goes from strength to strength. You've touched on a lot of things, but I've worked with social workers and family support, and I can understand the barriers with working with BME people from BME background, and I know there's been an increase where they need where they need help and support. What I would like to know is, how do you overcome the barriers that you have with the BME families, because there's a lot of cultural needs, religious needs, and also the language barrier.
Being culturally sensitive is something that is fundamental to our, to our aim, and especially in Newport, which is very multicultural, and it's something that we we certainly sort of try and champion. And our focus is to work in every community in Newport and to ensure that our services are accessible, for anyone, and that it's recognising any cultural barriers that may exist and overcoming those. It's also about exploring any ways in which we can make sure that our services are welcoming for families as well. This is something particularly that Barnardo's are also particularly concentrated on and have been for the past few years, and we're learning a lot, and I think using sort of platforms like the Newport Partnership to demonstrate how we can work in communities and to really make sure that we are accessible. Something that Chris and I have also been actively trying to do is to work with some community agencies as well, to make sure that because we recognise that sometimes families might not want to engage with us. They might prefer to engage with an organisation or a group that is more closely aligned to their specific culture or ethnicity and background. So actually what we have done, we tried to build links with these communities. Something that we've also been able to benefit from with the Barnardo's element of the Newport Partnership is from the learning, honestly. For example, Chris and I met this week with one of the strategic leads in Barnardo's in London, sort of to work with who is working with one of the lead local authorities in London who receive many of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in London. And so actually what we're able to do is to learn from other areas as well, and to make sure that our practice is sort of evidence-based and informed from sort of the very best, really, and it's not to say we always get it right, and I think we need to recognize there's always room for improvement, but certainly working sort of through our Newport Partnership, we're very keen to make sure that we are accessible and culturally sensitive, to make sure that families feel that they can access the support they need through the Newport Partnership.
Thank you. That's it. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Marshall.
Yep, thank you, Chair. It shouldn't be a surprise to note that I do have a number of questions, so you can stop me as and when I'll try and get away from the light. There we are. A little bit of light in the background. 2 seconds. There we are. So
we're not talking about midnight or something like that, Councillor Marshall.
no, but just a few all the same. But mine relate mainly to the partnership itself. Just on the premise that I've really heard a lot about the workings of the different projects already in a different meeting that I attended, corporate parenting. So I'm well rehearsed, obviously, with a lot of the kind of positives within those meetings. So we're talking about the partnerships and that. It's just to kind of grasp about who we are as partners. And the first one is, what do both partners bring to the table, and what resources are shared by each of the partners, please?
But I'm happy
I
to
think it's
start.
probably Mark and I, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'll have seen from the papers, the partnership's been in existence now since 2011, so over 10 years, and we've had 2 iterations of the partnership, if you like. So the first one was a tender put out in 2010, which Bernardo's was successful in winning, and then we repeated that exercise some 5-6 years later and reissued it. So we now have a 10-year arrangement with Bernardo's as the council. I think it probably made us extremely unpopular with legal colleagues and our contracting friends, because from a governance perspective it is an unusual arrangement, and I think Mark alluded to this was one of the first of the kinds. I mean, many of you will remember Mike Nicholson. This was his baby and he drove this through really as wanting to have a true partnership. The current financial relationship is such that in effect Newport City Council fund the family support. I mean, it is variable, but in the region of between £750,000 and £800,000 a year. And Bernardo's matches that with a £200,000 payment. And it's an unusual arrangement for Bernardo's as well, particularly these days, I think, Mark, in terms of the way that Bernardo's is using its voluntary funds to support the services that we offer. And I suppose the other element that comes into this, that's from our core budget, but also we've heard about lifelong links. That was an extra 50,000 that we were able to get from Welsh Government. We have had various pots of additional money that comes to us through the Integrated Care Fund or through specialist grants. And we then work with the partnership to look at what they can deliver quickly for us. I think whilst certainly even in the time I've been in the council, some of the recruitment issues have speeded up and it's great and we're able to do things. But what we find by working together is that we get an innovation that we probably wouldn't get either with Bernardo's on their own or the council on their own. So we bring the two, we're more than the sum of our parts, I think it's fair to say, in terms of being able to use those grants effectively. We have got a formal contract between ourselves and Bernardo's, and that obviously was signed in due course time, and we have regular reviews of that. So there are contract reviews, there are performance reviews, there are financial reviews, and then we also do, it's referred to in the paper, we do some audits of cases as well, which Dan and I are part of, which I mean I really enjoy. We learn a lot from those pieces of work in terms of deep diving into cases. So there's quite considerable scrutiny of the arrangements and of the governance that we have of it. I think the bit that is really interesting is that partnership bit on a statutory footing, because these are statutory services that we're delivering and we're asking Bernardo's to deliver with us. This isn't nice to have. This is provision that we really have to have in order to ensure that children, young people and families in our city are safe and have quality care. And I do think the partnership with Bernardo's consistently adds to our ability to be able to do that safely and well. Mark's just referred to in the response to Councillor Hussain is that, you know, for example, Bernardo's brings knowledge from Bernardo's itself in the same way as the council brings extra. So you've got that kind of immediate financial, but there's all sorts of other extra things that Bernardo's can throw into it, but equally the council can bring to that for Bernardo's as well. So I don't, Mark, I'm sure Mark will correct me, but I think what I feel is that both organisations benefit hugely from that relationship. It's very much a two-way. It's not one bringing a particular thing, it's a two-way process. But above all else, what I think is that the service we're able to offer for our families and our children and our young people is really without compare. Thank you for the question.
sorry, can I just quickly jump in there? And as ever, Sally explained beautifully. I think the real benefits. I think in terms of comparing, I mean, I have the fortune of working over many sort of different areas, and I think what we have in Newport is particularly special, honestly, in terms of being that hotbed of innovation, which, as Sally said, I think would be Bernardo's would be able to do it on its own, and I couldn't speak for the local authority, but I think in terms of the ability to draw on the combined resources from both sort of Bernardo's, the big national organisation, and sort of the strength of the local authority in Newport, it really provides us with a platform to generate these these innovative projects that we are seeing are having such a huge effect on families. I think also the pandemic has demonstrated, I think, hopefully some of the advantages. I think Chris and I were particularly busy at times during the pandemic, and I think with the with Bernardo's, it brings an added sort of layer of opportunity, I would say. For example, there's a Great British Tech Appeal that Bernardo's developed with Vodafone. So we were inundated at times with iPads and mobile phones and Wi-Fi dongles and things to make sure that during the pandemic that families could remain connected, and that we're able to continue undertaking interventions when the government was saying we weren't allowed to go and visit families in their homes. We're also able to tap into other elements, so like donations. We've had donations from some quite famous families where we've been able to support some of our families in Newport with things like supermarket vouchers and things like that. And Bernardo's have had during the pandemic, and I'm hoping we're going to get another partnership that's similar with the cost of living crisis, where we're able to support families with fuel vouchers and things like that. So I think that there's something that with Bernardo's we're able to bring sort of increased levels of sort of resource as well. In fact, sometimes it's quite off the hoof really, and it's sort of like Chris is taking receipt tomorrow of hundreds of family packs from the Museum of Wales, for example, that they've reached out to Bernardo's, and so I think that there's elements as well that can really help enhance the family's sort of experiences of being a family, which is something that we're really keen to help to deliver.
That's great. Thank you very much there for that answer. And Chair, if you allow me to address, I've probably got a few more to come. So are you happy for me to continue?
That's fine, Councillor Marshall, no problem at all.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we've just heard obviously about what each partner brings to the table, and there's some really good stuff, including extra information there about the cost of living situation, the fuel kind of costs and things like that there. So the next point linked to that is what can each partner bring moving forward? Because of course it's about the partnership is not just about what has been, it's about what can be as well. So looking at that, what can each bring to further better expand the partnership as as we're moving forward, and using that ability to kind of rethink using different experiences and different backgrounds?
I think Chris, what we didn't do at the start of this is decide who should answer the questions in which order, did we? So yeah, Chris, you go then.
I think sort of Sally alluded to sort of the innovation really of the partnership. I think one of the really main advantages that we have is the speed at which we can identify a problem or an issue within the community, an unmet need, and then we can address it. We've seen that within our rapid response service. And that became, we identified the need that these cases were coming through in crisis, and they weren't being tackled quickly enough. So we were able to set up a rapid response team, within a couple of months of identifying that issue, similar with our FGC service. And I think moving forward, it's about looking at some of the challenges that we expect to experience over the next sort of 12 to 24 months, and looking at what things we can put in place to address those. One thing that we've looked at and sort of are recruiting for at the moment is mental health worker. Primarily with our Baby and Me service, we've seen that the relationship between accessing mental health services has sometimes proved challenging. So instead of just leaving it there, we've decided, okay, well, this is something that, because of the partnership that we have with Newport and Bernard, is something that we can look to address. So we put out a role there for a mental health worker to act as that link between children and adult services. The parenting worker that I alluded to within the exploitation team, that was through sort of Dan's work with the exploitation strategy across Newport, identifying that whole family approach to be really beneficial. So then we can have a meeting about that, look at how best to tackle that, and then look to try and address that sort of unmet need really quickly. I'm just thinking, Mark, is there anything else that we're looking at doing over the next?
Well, I think there's a number of potential opportunities here.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that in Bernardo's that we're able to initially grow in the Newport partnership, and then we're able to obtain funding specifically and from the Home Office, was to do with our domestic abuse work.
Yeah.
Actually, that Home Office funding will be coming to an end. And so we are, and what is key for us is, whereas some of the other areas that have benefited from the Home Office funding will not receive that, but through the Newport partnership, we'll be able to then take that learning and to bring those expertise into the Newport partnership, and to make sure that the families in Newport continue to experience that sort of that higher level of intervention, really, in relation to domestic abuse. I think just some of the other things that are on the horizon, sort of through Bernardo's, are, for example, with Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees. Bernardo's has set aside some of its voluntary funds that Sally alluded to, and yet Newport is quite unique in terms of its voluntary funds, sort of in the structure in terms of the Newport partnership. But Bernardo's set aside some of its voluntary funds for developing services and projects for Ukrainian refugees. So that's something that I'm really sort of keen to emphasise as well, and it's quite open. So if there's any opportunities, that's something that we could potentially tap into through the Bernardo's and Newport partnership if needed, to sort of, to identify that, as well as generally using the organisational powers that exist, such as there's opportunities constantly coming up from a funding perspective, some that are local authority driven and some that are, third sector driven, if you like, and so we're able to tap into both. So I'm constantly getting sort of updates about new opportunities on the horizon that we could potentially sort of bring into the Newport partnership, to sort of to help us to continue to grow in line with the needs analysis that is constantly taking place between Sally, Dan and Chris and myself.
I suppose all I'd want to add to that is that I think some of this is, we don't know the answer to that, is that we will be responsive to the needs that there are in Newport, but we'll also be responsive to other research. So just picking up on the work that's been done around exploitation, for example, so the work that Dan particularly has been very heavily involved in with that, and then that links into the exploitation team here. If somebody described that to us 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had a clue what they're talking about. But that's to do with research that we learned from in other areas. And I think that I think both in terms of the partnership and children's services, we're good at that. It's something, there is a running joke that we have more pilots in Newport Children's Services. We could probably open a small airport, really. But I do think it's something to keep looking at research and it's really, I think it's so important to be open to that, not just to take part in research, but to look at the research that others are undertaking as well.
Thank you, and it's nice to hear the energy that's definitely in there. So even though that necessarily we don't know what the trends or likelihoods are going to be in the future, there's definitely a vibe of energy, definitely that we can get from you in that feeling. With the kind of note about the staffing and things like that, I know there was a mental health kind of position that was being named there. Just to inquire, obviously, I'm assuming within the partnership that the protocols of the council, like climate change, about the living wage and things like that, they're all included in as part of that partnership working.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's no question about that.
Yeah, brilliant. No worries at all. if Chair will allow me to digress, I've got a couple more, and then I'll give up time to, and then I'll come back after if Chair's happy.
Yes, fine, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. So within the partnership, just looking about what the risks are within the partnership and how they are mitigated. So what are the challenges, what are the risks and things like that, and how they're mitigated, please.
I'm happy to come in, Sally, or yeah. So when the partnership contract was first developed back in 2011, contractually safeguards were written in such that either party was able to give notice and end the partnership if not happy. But obviously within that contract as well, it outlined sort of a range of monitoring sort of requirements on both parts, really giving that joint level of responsibility to monitor and to ensure that performance is sustained, and that that both parties continue to be happy with the arrangement as well. So I think in terms of risks, managing that risk, there's quite a robust level of sort of oversight of that, as Sally alluded to, in terms of the monitoring meetings, the regular monitoring and tracking. And there's clear processes that can be followed as well by either party, either Newport City Council or Barnardo's, in terms of if there were any risks and about how we can look to address that, but obviously also what can be done by either party as well in case there being any issues.
And I think really in terms of the risks in the partnership, obviously Barnardo's is a very large nationally established children's charity of 150 years old. So it's an organisation with its own framework in terms of how it's protected against the most obvious risks. I do think in terms of children's services and more widely social services, what we all know is that there is constant risk that we live with and that we manage, and that's the reality of what we do. I suppose what I would say is that the nature of this work is all about really helping to manage risk safely and understand risk, but we cannot eliminate risk. And I suppose one of my really sort of almost my mantras is that I can never sit before you and say we have eliminated risk. I can't do that. I do think what the work that the partnership does and the work of wider children's services is always about understanding risk and then accepting it and trying to find ways to manage it without eliminating it completely, because we cannot do that. I think we all know, all members will be aware, and all officers are absolutely aware, is that been a number of awful tragedies in respect of children, even over the last 6 to 8 months, and they break our hearts, all of us, and all of us who work with that. It is incredibly difficult at times to kind of pick yourself up and dust yourself off. But what I would hope is that this relationship gives us a challenge within some of the work that we do, which is really important in terms of risk mitigation, and then that continued looking and working and exploring. But I do think it's a really important quick question to keep asking us, because I think we have to keep thinking about it, and you need to keep asking us that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Obviously, depending on the elections, you definitely have me haunting you with that question afterwards if I get re-elected, so we'll see. Thank you for that. Within the partnerships, obviously, we've said that the partnership is long-standing, about 10 years, 2010 the first. Is there any similar partnerships? Because I know there was mention maybe about Gwent level and things like that, and we're working somewhat regionally as well on a lot of premises there. Is there any better than us? Are we the best one? Are we held up as like best practice? And the other one is basically, do we learn anything from other similar partners and organisations? Thank you.
We are the best.
Of course, we're the best.
Yeah, you're all going to get that. Definitely going to get that. Absolutely, we are the best. I think what I would add to that is, I think recognising the challenges in some of the other partnership work that we do with agencies, with organisations, really brings home to me as the person who has the Newport responsibility for the kind of day-to-day management of the partnership is how effective this partnership is. So what I learned from this partnership is actually reflecting on how we could do better in some of the other partnership working we do, and where Chris was talking about earlier, the innovation and the ability to start things and respond to things quickly and effectively. You know, what we've built over the course of the 4 years that I've been here, you know, and predating my time, is that actually this partnership is really open and brave. Actually, we work really collaboratively together to ensure that the focus remains on children. And a lot of the barriers that you see when you read about partnership working is around, you know, organisational restrictions. Obviously, budgets come into that. Obviously, things around, you know, ethos and particular kind of protective practices that exist. And what we've got in this partnership, and why, you know, we'd all say that this is the best, is because, you know, it is absolutely, it does feel like one approach. It doesn't feel like a Barnardo's and a Newport approach that we're trying to kind of manage together. It feels like what we're doing is we're focused on the families that we work with, and we collaborate almost hand in hand to deliver that service. So for me, it absolutely is about, you know, what I've learned is that this is the blueprint really for effective partnerships. And when we look to develop stuff with other organisations, you know, I always reflect back to this one and on how those other partnerships are actually developing.
And just to add to that, Dan, you know, I'd absolutely echo what Dan has said, but certainly from a Barnardo's perspective, I mean, it's the longest standing partnership that Barnardo's has. But in terms of being seen in terms of best practice, well, you know, the Welsh Government are really starting to stand up and take notice of some of the innovations that are taking place within the Newport partnership. And to give an example as to how we compare elsewhere, even across Barnardo's, which has got hundreds of services across the country, they're in the process of finalising like a publication that is going to outline sort of best practice in terms of edge of care. And the more that the edge of care pathway work group sort of found out about the Newport partnership, I think half of this publication is going to be about the Newport partnership, honestly, and the various specialisms and projects that have been innovated in Newport. So I think it's testament to the work that everyone has done and those close relationships, as Sally and Dan and Chris have described.
That's brilliant, thank you. I think it was yourself, Mark, that was in the Senedd recently discussing about various parts of this as well, wasn't it? Baby and Me and things like that recently.
Yeah, yes, it was. Yeah, it was my fortune to do that, but it was a privilege to be able to talk about something that's so effective, but it's so powerful, honestly, in terms of the outcomes that we've been able to help sort of families and social workers to really deliver, and to get so many babies to return home to families that perhaps would otherwise likely not have done, but also for care experienced young people to have increased their support network so considerably with lifelong links. It's a good part of my job.
Chair, I'll finish on this last one before coming back again, if that's okay. Yeah, cool, thank you. The next one is, has the partnership opened new doors to shared networks? Because obviously Barnardo's would have their own networks that they have, and also the council through its statutory networks, so to speak, different organisations, contact people and things like that there. I know what was mentioned previously was about the health services and things like that, bringing in the police with child exploitation. That's within the partnership, but is there any ones that you have brought in as part of the partnership from external into the partnership using what you previously had?
I think an example of that is actually where Barnardo's have been able to really develop the relationships. I know Chris has worked closely with a BME organisation, and I think it was where we'd identified that we could perhaps improve some links in certain communities in Newport. So through those links and connections with Barnardo's, we're able to constantly draw in some of these links and connections. Like we're currently working with, as Chris will know, like the Family Rights Group, and to be honest with you, I think it's that joint element though of the Barnardo's Newport partnership that really helps us to bring. And it's like Dan said, it's not like we don't manage a Barnardo side or a Newport side. It's very much sort of bringing it all in together. And I think that's the opportunities that exist are really broad, honestly. And we're constantly looking at ways that we can sort of link up with other organizations. And like I said, like this week Chris and I met with one of the Barnardo's leads in London about unaccompanied asylum seeking children, and we've worked, I met recently with another service in London that works with care experienced young people, constantly looking at ways that we can sort of really widen that network that we have, but obviously it's all about improving what we deliver in Newport, either sort of vicariously or sort of through, but directly influencing our interventions.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll come back in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Suller, I'll come across to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all. You're working so well together, and well done to Mike if you were still here. Thank you, Sally, for mentioning him. Right, it's for Dan it is, please, if I may, because there's a lot of families who are very poor, aren't they, and they need help, right? And with your partnership, do you get in touch with business people, because they got to have a sense of worth, the people who we're helping, aren't they, to get a better job? And I think that's most important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And I think Mark's already alluded to some of the benefits on the partnership, actually, that there are some quite large organisations, national organisations. I won't mention their names on here, but suffice to say, furniture suppliers, home improvement companies, national supermarket chains, etc., have all offered a myriad of opportunities to us, actually, particularly during the pandemic. So I think we've been really fortunate to be able to link in with some of that corporate approach that Barnardo's has, that wider reach than perhaps Newport does. But really interestingly, some of you will be aware, but we, over the last couple of years and prior to the pandemic, with the Dragons and Newport County, they actually offered us our looked after children's Christmas parties. And through that, a really interesting network of local businesses and influential people from across Newport have offered a huge amount of not just financial but practical offers of support. And again, I won't name them because we're online, but suffice to say, the vested interest from the people of Newport in the people that we work with in Newport, who are in circumstances like you described, has been really passionate. And actually it really demonstrates that the people of the community of Newport itself actually really does care about its communities. And time again we've seen a lot of desire to help, and people have talked to us about offering accommodation, offering food at Christmas parties, venues, a myriad of things, really. So absolutely, we're really, I think we're really blessed that the people of Newport do really care about the people of Newport, and it shines through when we come to these meetings and talk to people like yourselves.
Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you've addressed that, because I've been poor myself and I know what it's like when I was a kid. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Suller. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I am aware that you're in a meeting. Would you like to ask some questions before I go ahead?
No, I've got a few still to come, but no, go on, carry on.
Okay, I've got two, but I'll put it into one. And it's the job you do is absolutely great. And I just wondered what your turnover of staff was, and listen, I've got a very close friend who works in social services in another part of England, and I know how stressed he gets, and I know how sometimes he struggles. and I'm sure our employees do as well. Do we have and I'm sure you do, because some of these things become, I suppose, personal at times. So do the council, Barnardo's, have a policy in place for our employees who can, if they're struggling, can go and sit down and talk to councillors themselves, and you know, they've all got well-being issues, I'm sure, with the job they do. So we got thing in place to look after them, or yourselves.
Yeah, so I think one of the really strong ethos within the partnership is we talk, and we've talked numerous times in the presentation, about having a trauma-informed approach to working with families, but we also try to install a trauma-informed work environment, really. So in answer to your question, the staff all have access to employees assistance programs if necessary. We've offered clinical counselling for workers if that's deemed something that would be beneficial to them. But I think just trying to give them a nice place to work, really. As you said, counsellor, the family support workers, intervention workers, and social workers, our colleagues in children's services, are working with some incredibly distressing things. And it is a tough place to work sometimes, and I think as sort of managers and senior managers within the industry, it's about acknowledging that and giving practitioners time to reflect and the space to feel comfortable and safe to do that. I believe quite strongly that we've been able to put that ethos within the partnership. We have things like Time Together. It's an initiative that Barnardo's have, and like 2 or 3 hours a month the team can just get together and do things that aren't work related, which is really nice. But yeah, I think it's about acknowledging that, you know, this can be a difficult time. I think remote working's been a struggle for some people. I think the type of people that work within this industry really enjoy other people's company, and offloading and debriefing with their colleagues, and that's something that obviously has been more of a challenge in the way that we're working at the moment. But then it's about trying to think of solutions to that and having more sort of team catch-ups and online meetings and things like that, to give people that opportunity to sort of offload as you would do in an office setting is really important, and something that we've sort of tried to sort of keep going over these last sort of couple of years, really.
Okay, thank you. I don't have no more questions, Chair, but I'd just like to make a point, please, and say thank you all. Well done. Your work is outstanding. And if I get re-elected in 4 or 5 weeks' time, I look forward to sitting down with you again and speaking to you again. Listen, we've been on the air now nearly 2 hours, and I'm sure we could carry on for another 2 hours discussing this, but the Chair wants to move on, I know, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Last hand up, Councillor Marshall. We've got a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I said I'll be back, as Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say. There we are. Just the looking at about the challenges prior to coming into the partnership, were any of those challenges actually realised, or was it pretty much the fact of they're just left by the side and it's like, okay, that's great, you know, they weren't really a challenge after all? And how was that kind of allowed you to build up as you further that partnership together over that 10 years and moving forward? How has that allowed you to build together within those close bonds, but also looking at you know, how you may have tackled any tight spots in between the partnership, and has there been any tight spots within the partnership, and if so, would you give us an example or flavour of what type of ones, and maybe how you mitigated around it with that strong partnership? Thank you.
I think the challenges pre-partnership, so going back before 2010, 2011, I think some of those, it's difficult to separate out what's been resolved by the partnership, what would have been resolved anyway, and what's been resolved or what's left. I think that prior to the partnership, we didn't have an effective family support service in Newport. We do now. We absolutely have an effective family support service. So I think that very clearly that is a challenge achieved, if you like, is that we went from really very limited input of this nature to something which is, I think Chris used the word beast at some point earlier, and I think this is a big, effective piece of work for families. I think if you go back to 2010-11, Newport Children's Services at that time had some quite really big issues with staffing, if you remember. I think one of the things that's happened sort of over the period of the partnership and other changes is some of that change of atmosphere in children's services. And I do think the partnership is part of that, because it gives social workers, it gives social work assistants, it gives them somewhere else to look in terms of their toolkit for working with families. And I do think that's important. And whilst we're not 100% staffed, the day that happens, I really will punch the air. But I think that compared to a number of other local authorities, we are in a better position, and certainly the morale of our staff generally, despite the issues that Councillor Spencer's just rightly raised about the nature of the work, is generally high in terms of that, our internal surveying of that, but also when the regulator comes in. I think, you know, one of those challenges is picking up, how do you form a partnership like this? We didn't know. You know, it was all a bit, oh, can you do this? Can't you do this? Will this work? Because there are elements of the partnership which we haven't touched on. So things like some staff are employed by Newport City Council, some are employed by Bernardo's, and there's crossovers between them. It's interesting, we haven't even found it necessary to mention that today, because actually we just meld those things back and forth now. So those things that were challenges in 2010, 2011 are old news, because we've cracked them. And similarly, that governance. Again, I think we've really demonstrated it is possible to do this and to have this type of working relationship. Hotspots, yes, of course, there've been hotspots. You know, there've been between all of us, there've been issues with staff, or there've been issues where we don't agree on cases, all the way up to needing to see some changes in management or relook at our performance. All of those we've been through. It would be a really odd partnership if we hadn't. And I've no doubt there'll be more to come. You know, there'll be a day where, you know, Mark sends Dan or I a really snitty email, or I send one back. You know, that's going to happen, isn't it? But I think that the cultural and emotional investment in the partnership is really strong and sees us through those things and sees us through the grit, really. And I think, I do remember back to 2011-12, I think at times that I think this is now very accepted within children's services in Newport. It wasn't in 2011, and over time it's become part of the furniture, and that's the way that we need it to be. And so, yeah, I think a lot of challenges overcome, nothing really outstanding, and lots of past hotspots, and no doubt more to come.
That's great. So it's great to hear the side, especially what you say about the staffing and stuff. It's not an us and them. It's pretty much a, you know, whoever needs to deal with it will deal with it, which is really, really good. Does lead me to a slightly different point. I know, Chris, you mentioned about going off to, was it to London as part of finding out about the, was it child exploitation situation with one of the local authorities in London, along with Mark?
Yes. Well, I wish we could go off to London. Unfortunately, I was in my yeah, but yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. The question links with that. So obviously you would attended, I assume, probably a virtual London trip, if you will, then, and learned various stuff that way. Has anything come from that? So have we changed anything within our organisations because of things that we've shared or changed with each other? And if so, is there another example of that? Because it would be really interesting to hear about how we might change culturally or with knowledge or how we operate.
I think with the trip that we had, or the virtual trip that we had, was around our approach to unaccompanied I can't even say it, unaccompanied asylum seekers, and I think that's a work in progress at the moment, in terms of engaging with our colleagues in Pathways within Newport about how, if at all, the partnership can look at bettering that offer that we give those young people. What we did find, and which was really encouraging, that what's happening in Newport is actually really good practice anyway. I think that was a bit of a concern, that we weren't experts in this field and we were just sort of finding our way. But I think some of the feedback that we got was actually, we're doing okay. Interesting in terms of sort of where we've learned from colleagues in terms of our FGC model. We engaged with colleagues up in Camden who have a really sort of established FGC footprint within the borough. And we got they came up and delivered training to us, so we're very open to learning from other local authorities and being guided by that. And I think importantly, similarly when we've engaged with family rights groups, I think what we tend to do is, okay, well, this is how it's been taught to us, but what's best for Newport and the local residents within Newport and within children's services? And sometimes that means adapting some of these models of work so we feel it's best able to meet the need within Newport. And I think sometimes people could be hesitant to do that, but I think we've been able to do that in terms of our FGC service and our exploitation work, and I think that's really led to some really improved outcomes for families and young people. So it's just about being flexible, I think, but also willing to learn from people that have been doing it for a lot longer than us.
I think, Chris, what you mentioned there, I think it's almost a twofold approach in Newport. If you think of the Baby and Me service, we're certainly leading the way, or if certainly I'd say in Wales, and when you look wider across the UK, we're certainly alongside or equal to anyone else that's delivering that type of response, and people are learning from us. So people come to Newport to learn about what we're doing, and the evaluation that Chris and Mark mentioned earlier, when that finally gets published, I think we're going to have there'll be a launch and there'll be an awful lot of interest there in what we're doing, because it's been really effective as the numbers and the stories that people have told about their experiences have actually explained. And then when we go to learn about other ways in which we could potentially deliver services, we're very open to that. So we're keen to go and learn from others for good practice. But often when I go to things on exploitation, for example, and another project around young people's entry into the care system, I come back quite reassured, and that actually, as we're saying, if we aren't leading on that work, when we go away and find out more about it, actually a lot of the practices that we're already delivering and trying to do is pretty much akin to what is out there. So I think again we've got the best of both worlds, really. Some of the stuff that we design and deliver, people want to learn from us, and then when we go and look at how we should be doing things, we come back quite reassured that actually we're not too far off where we need to be, and we then kind of Newportize that to our advantage then, really.
Thank you. That's also really interesting, and something that just clicked there. I was at a St. Patrick's Day event by the Consulate General of Ireland there the other day on the 17th, and listening to basically about the Irish government stance and coming over and investigating about the future generations and well-being commissioner and things like that there. So it might be something that you might have an international audience potentially actually having a look at what's going on, especially with the fact of the Irish government's looking in and other governments are looking in. So that might be interesting, and hopefully share the Newport flag up and around the place. Definitely that would be excellent to do, definitely. In relation to kind of linking in, so that's the international. Within national, is there anything, so we've spoken already about the fact that obviously the various committees and that in the Senate and things like that there. Has there anything been done or linked with the Future Generation and Wellbeing Commissioner, or anything like the Children's Commissioner or other regulators? Have they basically come in and spoken about it? Are you involving them in any part of the procedures as part of the partnership?
Future Generation Commissioners, not specifically. I mean, obviously we're linked into some of that, but not specifically. Children's Commissioner, we have had links on various elements and various parts of work, so that's there. And we picked up on the Senedd, we've given evidence on other aspects of the partnership historically around this work, so that's been there. I think the regulator, obviously all of our work is regulated by Care Inspectorate Wales, and that includes where we touch the partnership, if you like. So when children's services is being looked at, that might equally mean that this work is looked at as part of that inspection process. So for example, when we had the joint inspection in December 2019, some of the cases that were selected, there was overlap, so we needed to make sure that there was proper engagement. So Care Inspectorate Wales, very much that there's been that level of engagement. I'll be honest, Councillor Marshall, the touching points for children's services and social services as a whole with future generations are quite weak. You know, I think we've tended to be much more engaged with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and the elements that fall out of that from us, which obviously went through legislation at the same time, because that's very direct for us in terms of operating and how we function and how we're organised. So it's an interesting kind of sort of set of thinking about how do those two pieces of legislation interact. It's always something of a kind of an enigma really about how we pull the two together. Thank you.
That's fair, and also about the big one about the partnerships generally and that way of model of thinking, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, so we've already discussed about the best practice. The other one is what is the overall performance managed and reported situation like? So you know, is there anything that would come to various scrutinies to say about like certain figures or estimations or of the work, or how do you kind of how do you formulate plans and things like that to know where you're moving forward? Is there any type of goals that you aim to achieve? Or, you know, we spoke earlier, I think it was Councillor Spencer, about certain figures that was noted, and that we weren't quite, you know, within that remit, or others that was given to us or inherited, just about how we kind of link in with that and about how we report where the statistics come, where they go, things like that. It would just be interesting because I didn't quite get that from the report, but it'd be interesting just to establish that piece. Thank you.
I mean, I suppose in essence, this is about the Children's Services plan. So obviously Children's Services has a plan with 4 objectives in it, and this work needs to feed into that and does. And so, you know, number 1 on that in terms of us is support for families. And then number 2 of that is about the children in our care have a really good experience. So very immediately, in terms of what you've heard this evening, this absolutely dovetails into the core Children's Services plan, which then obviously goes up into the corporate plan. I think it'd be interesting post May the 5th about when we revisit our plan for the coming years, which obviously we will do after the election, and that will be a piece of work. But the partnership is cited throughout the Children's Services plan, so it's there and it's very much an integral part of it. And elements of this, if Councillor Marshall, if you want to go back, you know, we can go back and look at the plan. I know that, for example, I mean, Dan's got some great bits in there. He's responsible for ensuring that FGCs come in. Well, FGCs come in through the partnership. So you see elements of it all the way through. In terms of reporting, in terms of data, obviously we're here tonight, which is really important for us. And also we link very closely with our cabinet member. So there's that double for us. And as I just mentioned, we also have Care Inspectorate Wales, and we also have that regulatory oversight in terms of the external regulator.
Thank you, Sally. Just to add that bit of context, obviously within where it fits in and everything like that. So that's me, Chair. You'd be allowed to hear, and for the officers, just a big, massive thank you. I know sometimes it can be quite difficult for me. I'm quite interested, as you probably appreciate, especially in this field. So just thank you for your time and for your answers. And you know, it's incredible the amount of work you're doing, and it's fantastic. You know, some of the work is, in my eyes, world leading. You know, the Baby Me, things like that. There, especially in what we're doing, and you know, it'd be something that I'll be trying to sing the praises of. And when I go, you know, to further St. Patrick's Day events and things like that, they're trying to get a couple of people from Ireland to investigate what we do over here, I think, and other places that, you know, we may go and venture off to. But I think, you know, well done, and a massive appreciation of the work that you do and your officers. So please feed that back from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marshall. I can't see any other hands up. So then it comes to my questions, but lucky enough, even though it was an hour and 3/4 of questions, they've all been answered. In fact, one of them, my last one, Councillor Spencer said, did I want to ask a question? I said no, and that was the question I was going to ask. So I think that's also the thoroughness of this committee. It is a good committee, and I'd like to finally say, because it is coming up to 7 o'clock for yourselves, and it's been said from everyone, but just from the chair here is a massive thank you. And if you could please take that back to your teams and everyone with what's gone on and what you do, and this really is frontline. This really is frontline work. So please take it back, and thanking all yourselves as well, but your team. I know all the committee have said it, so I'm just really sort of, as the chair, really reiterating exactly what I know they'd all want to say, and they have said it is a massive thank you to all your teams and for everything you do. Have a good evening.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Neil.
Hi, Chair.
Wow, what a meeting! What a meeting! That was a really informative meeting, and thank you all councillors for your input there, and yeah, learn a lot. So now, really, the wrapping it all up, Neil. Where are we with that?
Yes, please, Chair. Some of the comments that I've taken down is that they recognise that they need to be better engaging with people, but it's been a real shift, especially with the BME community. Focusing on working within every community to ensure that services are accessible for everyone, and they recognise any barriers that may exist. They do, yeah, they said they recognise room for improvement. They mentioned about the work coming through with Barnardo's with the Ukraine refugees as well, that set aside funds developing services and projects for the refugees as well. And also that they're constantly looking at ways to link up with other organisations as well, and the fact that it does feel like it's just one approach, it's not separate, Newport and Barnardo's. Is there anything further that the committee would like me to include?
Anyone want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The one part I found was interesting was about the cost of living side of things, which I think should be mentioned where possible, please. Especially looking at the things about the fuel, costs and things like that. That'd be interesting to find out a bit more about when that comes live. But I think it just shows another part of the work that's undertaken. So if we can find out more, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to add? Mark?
Yeah. Excuse me, and I suppose it's because of my union head on. I suppose I just like it mentioned that we really need to keep offering our staff management, whatever for their mental health, whatever we can offer them in any help.
100%. I think we'll all agree with that. You got that, Neil?
I've got that, Chair.
Okay. Anything else to add? Are we happy with that?
Yeah, make one thing to see, Chair, and it's with what Mark said, and they need to know they've got a sense of worth, because they are good people, and Sally Ann Jenkins, every officer that we've dealt with have been superb. Thank you, Chair.
Agreed. Okay, Neil, so if you can then tie all that up, is that okay?
It's fine, Chair. Thanks very much, committee.
Okay, now we're going back, and Steve, can you put your camera on?
I suppose I can. There we are, Chair. Thank you.
Obviously, I wasn't at the last meeting.
Certainly.
So whoever was there, can you all look at the minutes, or have you looked at it and all happy to agree?
There's one amendment I'd like to make, Chair, just for source of accuracy. It says in attendance Councillor Jane Mudd, but my recollection was that she did send her apologies in, and that we did have Rhys Cornwall taking up some parts of that, and also Tracy McKim. So if that can be corrected, I'm more than happy to move the minutes myself and propose them.
That would be amended. Thanks very much, Councillor Marshall.
And we're all happy for the minutes. Yep.
Can I second them, or do you want
to?
Yeah,
as long as we're all agreed. No one else has got any issues with them.
I'll second them, please. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we've got the apologies, declaration of interest, minutes of previous meetings, Bernardo's, the scrutiny advisors reports, which you should all have in front of yourselves. Neil, would you like to?
Yep, thanks, Chair. Just the two actions from the previous meetings. The committee noted the recommendations in the report for the One Newport Wellbeing Plan. Loads of minutes have been forwarded to One Newport. Loads will be given at tonight's meeting, and we sent the comments and recommendations as well. We've also done the same for the EAS business plan, so that's been sent to the cabinet members and the partners for that. So no updates on the draft annual forward work programme yet. We're going to be working with heads of service soon. So that's all of our updates on our end, Chair.
Okay, so that's number 6 covered as well. Would that be correct, Neil?
That's everything, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Marshall.
Sorry, Chair. It's just the point of at the last meeting, just to go back a slight bit, we had 2 reports and they were quite in depth because we had the programme, I think, just generally about the interventions and things like that there. The interventions took quite a lot of time, so there was not a lot of time afterwards for EAS. So if it was a kind of bulky agenda point, can we just in future try and split them off and just, acknowledge that if possible?
Yeah, myself and I've discussed that with the officers this week anyway, exactly that point, Steve. Okay, right, can all councillors, can you put, if you can you, if possible, can you put your cameras on, please? Okay, okay, Neil, this is obviously the end of the meeting. This is me done, but I want to give Tom the actual end of the meeting because this is going to be one of his last meetings, and I think it's just fair that sort of I stand back now. So that's me done on this meeting. I hand it over to Tom to say a few words and close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a wonderful pleasure and privilege to work with you all. And I think we've done a really good job on scrutinising every report. And that's what it's all about. And the officers have been really marvellous in presenting these reports. I do thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Meeting closed, and Tom, everything you do, good luck. It's been a privilege sitting with you. Good luck, and meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
the best, Tom.